Buenas tardes para todos. Bienvenidos.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this live low-code demo webinar by GeneXus. This is our first webinar in 2023, so we are thrilled to meet you all once again. So this first webinar, we'll be talking about low code. I will tell you also a bit about the platform, GeneXus, which is the reason why we're here. And then we will see a little bit of GeneXus in action with a demo. Finally, to wrap it up, we will be sharing some questions and answers. We'll have a short Q&A session at the end. So I would like to invite you to start thinking about potential questions for that session. My name is Jaime Gonzalez, and I'm Sales Director at GeneXus. And today I'm joined by Rodrigo Mendez, a GeneXus Solution Specialist. So without further ado, let's get this started. And let's talk about the current situation of our industry, our sector, which is, of course, software development. So there are a number of challenges that we are facing, those of us that work in the industry. First and foremost, as you know, the world needs more and more software. And so here we could quote that very famous quote. It says that software is eating up the world, but at the same time, making and maintaining software is more complex and more difficult and expensive. And of course, this calls for a huge demand for talents, because developers can create this software. The developers that can create this software are very few. And apart from that, they are very sought for by different companies. According to Forrester, for next year in the US, we will have a deficit of 500,000 developers in the States alone. The applications that need to be created nowadays have to be done more quickly. We need to have better time to market, which is so necessary for all the applications that these developers need to create. So we have this timing issue that is part of the equation, and that here is reflected with that need for speed. Not only do development teams have a huge backlog in terms of the changes to the applications that they already have, but also they have to create new ones. On top of that, users and regulations keep changing all the time. So, of course, the software that we create today needs to be flexible, and it needs to allow us to be easily maintained in the future. So how do we face all these challenges, this perfect storm, if I may? Well, one way of doing it is working with technology. In other words, giving developers different platforms and tools that will enable them to automate as much as they can and to become thus more efficient and productive. And this is where the different low-code platforms come into play. So most certainly, all of you must have heard about low code. Maybe you've seen an announcement on LinkedIn about this webinar, and that's why you chose to sign up. But there are several definitions. But just to standardize our notion, we could say that these platforms that are used by professional developers that aim at simplifying the development creating process, which tends to be very lengthy and very complex. And they allow us to create mission critical applications in the fraction of the time that it would take otherwise to do it manually or just following traditional development mechanisms. As a matter of fact, Gartner, the renowned consulting company for our industry that, as you know, oftentimes has done reviews on GeneXus, they've said that by 2025, 70% of new applications developed within enterprises will use no-code or low-code technologies. I just want to get something straight from the get-go. We have no-code solutions or platforms and low-code platforms. I'm sure that you must have heard about no-code. As we were saying, this idea of low-code refers to this platform for professional developers that allows them to create mission-critical applications. But there is this other category that is a no-code category that basically consists of platforms that are aimed at we call this group of people business users or citizen developers that don't have a developing or programming background, but with these drag and drop features that no-code platforms give you, they could create very easy applications in a very fast fashion. And so this is there to meet some very specific needs. The problem with this kind of applications is that they are not usually scalable and they tend to be quite limited in what they can do. However, with low code, which is a term that was coined by Forrester, which is another great consulting company in the industry a couple of years ago, and which is nowadays used by all of us around the world, well, that will allow you to create complex mission critical applications. And that's how we got to GeneXus, which is our low code platform of the day. GeneXus is software that makes software. That's our elevator pitch, as we call it. Whenever someone asks us about what GeneXus is, we just have this phrase. And the mission and the vision of the company has always been to simplify software development. How do we do this? Using GeneXus, which is a higher-end language that is based on a reality description whereby developers will describe the needs of their users and the businesses in this high-end language. And then GeneXus, by using code generators and artificial intelligence, it will automatically create the code for the different programs and databases. But it does not only create software, it also maintains it and allows it to evolve through different technologies and over time automatically. So what can you do with GeneXus? With GeneXus, you can use a single model and create multi-experience platforms, mission critical applications, which are web, mobile, and Rodrigo will be telling you a bit more about that in the technical part. You can also create applications and integrate with pre-existing databases or systems, and you can create new software that will publish services, and those services will be consumed by third parties software. And in this case, you can integrate with external systems. So you may be asking yourselves, okay, great, there is a huge offer of low code and no code in the market. It seems as if we have a new proposal every day. So how does GeneXus stand out from that pool of vendors and solutions? First of all, we are the low-code company with the longest track record. We were born some 35 years ago when the term low-code was not even existent. And then through Forrester and Gartner's and their reviews, we got to this category that we are nowadays. But back then, we didn't have this term, this concept. And this allows us to give our code eternal youth. What do I mean? In GeneXus, we have clients that started in the early 90s developing in RPG or COBOL, and they created their software created in GeneXus. So GeneXus automatically wrote the code in RPG, and then when the Windows revolution came along, GeneXus regenerated automatically all that software for desktop. And then the same clients have the same knowledge about their projects running on the latest web mobile technologies. And so GeneXus has allowed them to surf this technological evolution in a very successful way, making future-proof applications. In GeneXus, we are knowledge-driven, the knowledge that companies and users and businesses have, and the code and the platforms are just a consequence of this creation process of that software. So that's why we say that we are technology agnostic, as you can see in the center of the slide, but not ignorant, not oblivious to it, which is a substantial difference. Another difference is how we manage our licensing. You will see that most low-code and no-code vendors will give you licensing depending on the number of end users of the applications that you generate, apart from other variables that make it more complex to estimate how much development could cost. In GeneXus, this is very straightforward. You have a licensing per developer, so each developer will have a license, and with that license, they can create any number of web or mobile applications without any kind of restrictions. And those applications could have an N number of users, end users, without this meaning that the clients will have to incur additional fees or costs. On top of that, GeneXus generates pure native code, and we will talk about that on the next slide. And that code could be developed with absolute freedom in any kind of environment. So GeneXus generates mobile applications both for Android and iOS. We have Java for Android and Swift for iOS. We also create software automatically for different web languages, and we also have this last incorporation, which is the Angular generator. And for the backend, we have Java, which is done automatically with GeneXus, and also .NET and .NET Framework, and those bound languages that I told you about, which are RPG and co-op. So GeneXus also automatically maintains most relational databases in the market, such as MySQL, Oracle, etc., and also non-SQL databases. And once the product is ready to be deployed, we can do so in the cloud with whatever cloud provider we may choose. And we can also choose to deploy on premises. That means locally. With GeneXus, you don't have to run applications in any specific cloud or anything of the sorts. You can just pick any cloud provider and you can do it on premises, or even in a hybrid architecture, you can have part of the application running in the cloud and the other part on premises. I'd also like to tell you a bit more about the possibilities that you get with GeneXus. GeneXus has a BPM modulator that allows you to create frameworks and business processes. We also have GeneXus Server, which is the SBN, where you have this collaborative work and where many developers can work simultaneously on one same GeneXus project, regardless of whether they're working remotely or in different locations. And you can have a DevOps culture. We have GX test for different sorts of testing, automated testing, and so on. We have GeneXus Query, which is for queries, of course. And then we have a specific product, which is for the SAP ecosystems. That's called GeneXus for SAP systems, that allows you to create web and mobile applications that are satellite to the ERPs of this SAP, and that communicates with it through something that are web APIs, and this is frictionless with the ERP. So you can create web and mobile applications in GeneXus that will increase the functionality of that SAP's ERP, and it will have the same look and feel as the ERP, which is the Fiori look and feel, which is the design system by SAP. Now, I'd like to tell you a bit about an emerging technology that you must have heard about. You may have heard about super apps, which are digital ecosystems that consist of a native application, which is called the super app, where users will consume different products and services that could be really varied through mini apps that are dynamically loaded in the super app. These mini apps are also native applications, either iOS or Android, but instead of being downloaded in your phone from from your phone, it's done dynamically in the super app. And a typical case here is WeChat, which I'm sure you must have heard of. It's the equivalent of WhatsApp in China. WeChat started some years ago as simply a messaging solution, just like WhatsApp. And then it began to escalate in terms of functions, thus allowing us through many apps and many programs to consume a number of products and services within that super app that now is WeChat. Nowadays, they have more than 1 million mini apps in their ecosystem. And there, for example, you can get delivery, you can get a cab, you can buy tickets for a certain show, the theater, even you can buy plane tickets and so on and so forth. Why am I telling you this? Because GeneXus, and this is something that we'll see in further detail with Rodrigo in the practical part, GeneXus allows you to create super apps and mini apps from scratch, using our platforms, but also it allows you to create a native application that was not written in GeneXus, that it was written, for example, with Swift or for Android, and you can convert it through a technological transfer into a super app, allowing this possibility of dynamically loading super apps and mini apps. So this kind of applications is becoming increasingly popular in the finance and retail sectors. And it's becoming more and more common on this side of the world. To tell you a bit more about the ecosystem, we have a native super app at the very center of the diagram. On the right, you have the different mini apps and how they are dynamically loaded, each of them providing different service. This could be provided by the very super app owner or maybe other industries that have entered into a sort of economic or commercial agreement with the super app's owner. And to the left, you have your user space. Users interact with a super app and they have this frictionless experience because what they do is they download the super app once. When they register, they will input their payment details, and every single time that they need to consume products and services, they will load these mini apps, but they do not need to download a new application, register again, input all the payment details. All of that is in the super app itself. So you can just have access to a number of questions and solutions, which is completely frictionless. Now I'm going to hand it over to my friend Rodrigo, and let's get down to the practical part of the session. Thank you so much, Jaime. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being part of this first webinar in the year. I'm Rodrigo Mendes. As Jaime told you, I work in the technical commercial department of GeneXus, and I'll be showing you a few demos of all the different things that Jaime told you about. We are running very short of time, and we have so much to share with you. So let's get started. Let's begin with a demo of how to build with GeneXus, which is we're going to create a web and mobile application for this scenario, and we will be considering a system that is for e-banking, because through the mobile interface, you will have the possibility of users checking their accounts and the transactions that they may have. So we will see some of the features through the demo. What we will do with this demo in terms of the interfaces, we will use a GeneXus feature that will allow us to import design that has already been created for external by external design tools such as Sketch or Figma. This is one of the approaches where the development team may approach all the design like this. So how do we do this? For this application, we have a design that was created in Figma by a team of designers, where all the different interfaces for the mobile application have been created, and us as GeneXus developers will be importing that design so that we can start working on our project. So what I did here is I copied the URL, and I'm going to go back to GeneXus where I have an empty project. I chose .NET as a technology, and as a database, I'll be using SQL Server. So the first thing we will do is to import that design to see how it looks in GeneXus. So we go to application integration. We have this design import option. We click on it, and this is where we're going to load all the design, whether it's Figma or Sketch, in our knowledge base. Once you've done that, you went to the Figma design link. GeneXus will connect with that design, and it will show us all the panels that it's going to import. And from here, you can select which panels you want to import to your knowledge base from that external design. What's important about this, apart from choosing the panels, where here you can have, a preview and the different elements included in each panel that you will be importing. When you click on OK, GeneXus will read the metadata of that design, and it will create all the different screens for your mobile application with all the elements and the images and all the sources and everything that you defined from that mockup. Keep in mind that this is one of the many ways where in which we can approach interface development in GeneXus. You also have the possibility as developers to create your design from scratch using all the tools available that will allow you to set up web and mobile panels and adjust all the different properties of each element as well as their classes. GeneXus also gives you the possibility to use design patterns. Basically, these are a number of features that solve very common problems when it comes to interface building, and it will provide you with a series of templates from which you can choose the one that best fits the interface that you want to generate, and then you can make any little tweaks. So the import is done from that external design, and you will see that you have different panels that have been created based on that design that you chose. Here you have different panels, how they look in that abstract editor, and what you can do now is to put them in the order of your preference in the application. So what we're going to do now is we're going to run this application, this mobile application for the first time based on that external design import to see how it looks like. So here I'm going to our project preferences because we will be running this application on iOS. So what I did was I turned off the Angular generator, and therefore we are only going to use the iOS feature, and I'm going to configure all the details. For the simulator where the application will be running. Let's copy it here. Put our IP. And let's see how it looks like when it's running after you import it. Please bear in mind that we didn't change anything yet. The only thing that we've done so far is to import the design that had been created using Figma. So here I'm copying my virtual machine's IP address, where eventually we will be hosting all the services that will be consumed by the mobile application. So once you have all the properties configured, we can give it a try for the first time. Give me just a second, because I forgot to change the version that I have. Okay, now, yeah, we are ready to go. So you can see how this design that we imported looks like. It's important to understand that on top of the acceleration that you get when you import the design from external tool, where you already made all the decisions of how, in terms of colors, the different layouts and classes, etc. With GeneXus, you will keep on modifying if you want to stuff and making decisions to make any necessary adjustments in the future in terms of the application's interfaces. Of course, you can re-import it anytime in the future, and you can just keep on working with it. Once we have run this mobile application, that will have static data that are taken from the design. So you will have access to all this static information on your mobile application. What we will do now is we will define the back office and the backend technology, where we will choose the logical model, and we will be managing all the information from there. So what is our last step in this demo? We're going to connect that information that we are managing from the back office so that it will be shown in the mobile application. That's when you will have bound the mobile interface with the services, consuming the services in the backend of your application. And this is what you have after you run it for the first time using this Figma design. You see that you have the mobile application with the static data, and you can navigate the different screens that you chose to import in your knowledge base. This application is only generated for iOS, but if we have an Android emulator, you can totally prototype it for Android devices. So now let's go back to our knowledge base. Let me just close this so that we can see the full screen. And we will define the entities that will make up our logical model. So what we will do now is we will define an entity that is going to be called account, where you can specify the information that you want to store for the different accounts in this e-banking application. So here we are going to define the different attributes. We will see that accounts are identified by an account number. You can define the type of data. Here we will have a numeric, and we will change the domain so that we say that it's 8 digits each account. And then you will have an account description, for example, which is basically the name. And we will say that this may have variable characters. Of course, here you have different kinds of data that you can define with GeneXus, from the most basic stuff to the most complex stuff, where GeneXus has already included some transactions and operations in terms of both the decisions that you make when you're working on the interfaces, as well as in terms of validation, information validation operations. So let's have an attribute which is for the account balance. Let's say that it has 12 digits and 2 digits, 2 decimal digits. And once you have defined the structure of your accounts, you save and you apply one of the patterns that I told you about. In this case, we will be using a pattern that is called work with for web that will basically allow you to implement all the interfaces so that you can support the ABM operations. So here, for example, you can create accounts, you can change existing accounts, you can view all accounts, and so on. So this pattern will allow us to generate all the interfaces to manage the information for that entity. What I did here is I clicked on run, and you get this pop-up message where GeneXus is asking you to specify the name of that database, which is going to be created automatically, and it will maintain over time this physical scheme. So you just need to select the SQL server. And what I will give you a name. I'll choose a name for the database. So demo database, we create the database. It's empty. And once that you click on finish, GeneXus will start running a process where it will analyze all the different objects defined in the project at a logical model level that will end up impacting these physical tables in our database. So here you can see the impact analysis, where based on what I defined, which is just one entity, GeneXus will be sharing with us the decisions that it makes automatically on that database. So we see here that it's creating a table that is called account with these attributes. And this allows us to see the different lines that are included in the build that GeneXus is writing. This impact analysis may seem very straightforward because we just did one entity, but when it comes to working with different entities or very complex entities, GeneXus will infer all the different tables that you have generated on that database. Sorry, there's an error. Let me click here again. Or otherwise we can just try to create a new database, because apparently there was a conflict in the connection with SQL. Okay, so here we see that the tables have been created and that the reorganization was successful. So GeneXus ran the script. It enabled all the tables based on its analysis, and now it's writing all the front end of that application, of that back office, from which you will manage all the accounts. Once that this is done, that this is over, you will see that you have a launchpad where from the IDE you can directly run these objects that were defined in the web application. So what I did here was I clicked on the work with accounts object that was created by the pattern. And we can see that this interface was created and it supports all the operations that you want to use to have the ABM of your accounts. So here you can see the different accounts. So let's choose a balance. Oh, what I was telling you about the types of data that we have in GeneXus, depending on this, we will be running different validations. So for example, if we mention a main data type, that if you have an input that is made, then GeneXus will automatically implement the validation operation saying that that corresponds to a main. So it will not allow you to enter data if it doesn't have, for example, for that email, the at symbol. Yeah. In the case of dates, it's different because, for example, GeneXus will draw a calendar control so that you can pick dates directly on the interface. Here, what I've done is I defined two different accounts. We have the preview of all the accounts that you have defined, and you can modify the data of the details of those accounts. You can also delete it if you want to. Here you have a filter icon. Of course, you can go back to that pattern instance and you can keep on working on it. You can have several filters. You could have more controls that will be shown in these interfaces that are automatically created so that you can make your development faster. So now that we have created the back office side of things, let's go back to GeneXus to have one last iteration on this application. And it is here where we will link the data that we defined in our backend with the two accounts that I just mentioned, so that they will be shown on your application, on your mobile application. So now we can see here in the accounts, the information that the static information that we brought from the design. And what we want now is for that information to be linked to what we truly want. So how do you do that with GeneXus? It's quite straightforward, because from that import that you made from the design, GeneXus not only created all the panels, but it also created different folders that have objects that will make it easier for you to load information and to link those different elements in the mobile application with information that you have defined in your back office. So we're going to go here, for example, to this element, which is the element that will load the information in the accounts that I showed you on the mobile application. And we can see that it's been statically defined. And what we do here is quite simple. We just delete this and we make it dynamic by referencing the information that you have in the account entity. So for example, here in this section, which is the card title section, we will say that it's account description. Here in the number part, in the same way, we will choose account number. Then we will change it to string because it's a numeric value. And here in balance, let's put a space here. And we will choose account balance. And we will choose to string. So we're going to save all the changes that we made and this data provider, which is the one in charge of loading the details on that for that card in the mobile application, and we will run this again. And here you can see how you have linked the information in this web app, because at the same time GeneXus created the database to persist that information. And in the mobile application, we will have the connection that we have between services, the native mobile application, and then also in the backend, everything that has been implemented directly by GeneXus. Here you can see it, you can see in the console that the application was run again. So if we go back here, you can see the accounts that are defined with their numbers and their balances. So this gives us a starting point to keep on working in the same way with, for example, credit cards. To wrap up this demo and show you how this system could look like, by running a few more iterations, here you can see a different system where we not only defined accounts, but we defined users, transfers between the different users' accounts, types of credit cards, and credit cards that have been assigned to the different users. By the same token, working on the different data providers that have been created, you can link this information that is in the backend with the mobile application. So here you can see the mobile application that is connected with this system. You can see that it has many more features. It's showing us all the different accounts. And here you can have access to the different details of the different transactions for each account. So this is one of the ways in which we can work in GeneXus. It's one of the multiple approaches that we have. Now, what I wanted to show you that Jaime told you a bit about in the introduction is a super app up and running, which is this one here. It's also based on the same kind of scenario, which is e-banking. What you have here is the super app, and these options that you have here on top are the access to the different mini apps that will allow you to load it dynamically. So for example, you come here and you will see that what's happening is that within these super apps, what this is doing is it's redesigning the mini app or mini program. What is this food fast thing? It was an application that was created with GeneXus, just like any other mobile application, thanks to the possibility of our technology in GeneXus creating super apps where you can include in a GeneXus application, or perhaps an application that was created natively. You can include a render, and you can have the connection so that you can dynamically load these mini apps, and you can interact from one single point with different systems. What allows you to do this is what we call the mini app center, which is trying to put it in layman terms, it's like a store where you have all the different mini apps, and from which you can associate those mini apps to a super app. So here you have a mini app center where you have the list of all the different super apps that we have, and you can see the mini apps that are registered and to what super app they belong. Because when you define a super app, you allow that super app to show a certain group of mini apps, different programs or services that will be implemented in different ways depending on the goal that you had when you created the super app. And these mini apps are registered in this mini app center. So what the super app does is that it will connect to this mini app center. It will get the information from that mini app. It's going to be open, and that information is going to be brought here so that you can dynamically run it on the super app. This mini app center is very similar to maybe what a store and your phones. And well, of course, you can define different members that will have access to this mini app center with different privileges, such as, for example, creating super apps, creating mini apps, because when you have a mini app, or when a mini app is published or a new version of that mini app is published, you can have a system to review that mini app, that it can be approved so that it's publicly shown and it can be accessed from the super app. So you can create different programs, and it's important that these mini apps go depending on the interests. In terms of development teams, these are independent projects because it will make this system much more maintainable if you're following this super app architecture. For instance, if you want to change the Food Fest system, this will be independent from a different project. And then you publish it in the mini app center so that you can have that integration. What's important about this? That from that super app, when it comes to creating it, you can share information. This information will be relevant to the different mini apps. So you can create systems where, for instance, you can implement that in the super app that will be a connection with a payment method. And the different mini apps will be stores where you can get products or services, and you can have access to those mini apps and to buy, and then go back to the super app with the total purchase amount so that you can make the payment from the super app. So this is a mini app for a movie applications where, for example, you can buy a ticket. And when you go to the payment part, you go back to the super app to choose what card you want to use to buy the tickets to the cinema. This is quite innovative, and it will give us a lot of possibilities to rethink how we approach digital transformation with GeneXus when it comes to creating these systems, because this super app technology not only will give you advantages in terms of development and how you maintain and evolve a system that is going to be ever growing, and it will include increasingly more features, but it also gives you the possibility to adapt changes that are coming from business needs. So, for example, here you can use a super app to have different mini apps that will be for internal use at a company, but also it will give you the possibility of having of getting the most out of the different partnerships that you have within your companies, or even work with new partners by allowing your platform to be used by your partners and in a way that they can add value to your application. And, at the same time, you give them accessibility and you give them your users so that they can have access to their businesses. This is a bit of what I wanted to tell you about super apps. I'm guessing that you may have plenty of questions. And we have one last surprise in terms of the demo. I don't know if Jaime, you would like to give it an introduction. Great, Rodrigo. Thank you so much. Before we move on to the Q&A session, as a prize, let's say, or as a reward for those of you attending this very first webinar of the year, we will give you a little preview of something that we've been working on at GeneXus. As you know, in November 2022, our industry was completely revolutionized. I don't know if you remember what happened in November last year. Let's see if you can write it on the chat. It's something that everyone is talking about. Nobody's saying anything. Okay. Well, okay, November 2022. It was the launching of ChatGPT, OpenAI, and very soon it became a platform that hit the fastest ever, the 100 million users in just 2 months. Gustavo Peretti, he wrote ChatGPT. TikTok took 9 months to get 100 million users. Instagram took 2 years and a half. And as in GeneXus, we refer to ourselves as builders, and we don't wait for waves to serve them. The moment that we see a little breeze, we just head to the water. And we started working on a new way of creating software that integrates the AI used by ChatGPT and OpenAI. And that's what we call GeneXus Next, which is what you have on the screen with Rodrigo. Rodrigo, sorry, you're in mute. Okay, thank you, Jaime. Something that we can do with GeneXus Next is leverage that power that we get from AI services, especially OpenAI services. And we will use GeneXus Next to define a system that we want to create. And GeneXus will automatically create that system using AI services. It will do it for us. So what we'd like you to do is to encourage you to tell us what kind of system you would like to create. And I will write it here, and we will see together the process of what GeneXus Next can do. So don't be shy, propose a system, and let's create it together with GeneXus Next in the minutes that we have left in this webinar. Any idea? The only thing that we will do here is describe our business. We will say, for example, I want a system that allows me to do this and that. If you want to suggest any ideas. Okay, so here in the Q&A we have Rodrigo Sosa, for example, for a delivery system. Jorge Izquierdo also, he also said something. Okay, multi-store price verifier. Okay, payroll, job search, file saving systems. Oscar said something for like business administration services. Victor said just a client, a customer list, a casino. Okay, so let's pick one, Jaime, and maybe I can add some more details in the description that we can make. So Federico Citele said staff oversight or staff control. So we will write here. We will write here, and we will tell GeneXus that we want to create a system where I can handle employee payroll and hirings. I want a system where I can handle employee payroll and hirings and interviews with 6 entities. Okay, this is the description that I'm writing to GeneXus Next, and now GeneXus Next is using AI services to determine, based on that input, what is the model that I should create. It's telling me, it's given me an application name and a tagline, which is just like a title, and based on the business description, I specified 6 entities. And depending on how many we tell them it should have, it will, or otherwise they will just make a suggestion according to what it could be best for your needs. So in this case, we will have 6 entities, an employee, which is the wage part and the payroll. Then all the interview process, the banking information as well that I had written, interview with a typo, where you will interview potential employees, the application, so where the different employees will be able to fill in different forms to apply for a position, and then the positions of each employee. So this gives us the possibility to try again if we didn't like this suggestion, maybe by introducing a slightly different prompt, or we can just publish back office. So we click here on publish back office, and you will see that GeneXus will start working on that back office. So it will create the application. Something very similar to what we did in the demo when it comes to defining entities, but and of course all the different interfaces. And it will also create trial or test data to take a look at how how it would look like. Jaime, perhaps in the meantime, while we wait for the project to be done, we could answer a few questions. Yes, this is going to take some 5 to 6 minutes. So let's make good use of this time. Manuel Ruiz asked us at the beginning of the demo, in the designs, do you establish the different connections between interfaces? You can import that directly. It will be in GeneXus if it is defined in Figma. So navigating between those screens, if you define it like that in Figma and then you import it to GeneXus, it will happen that when you click a button, for example, it will take you to the screen where originally in the first design it was specified that you had to go. Guadalupe Baigorria is asking us, the application that has already been made with, what tool was it built with? Is it Power Apps? No, it's GeneXus low code development. Benjamin, do you also have integrations with Atlas CMS, SMS as a Strapi? With GeneXus, we can integrate with any system that has exposed APIs, because at GeneXus we can connect, with GeneXus we can connect to those entities as well as exposing your own APIs. Great. Rodrigo is asking us, GeneXus Dev, is it available for Windows and iOS? Rodrigo, for now only Windows, because in this case, for example, I'm using a Mac, but I'm using GeneXus through a virtual Windows machine. What we are working on, which is in a closed beta stage, is going to be a GeneXus IDE, which is going to be GeneXus Web, and it's going to be 100% on the web, and it will give you access to create projects in that IDE. So that will be available both for Windows and Mac. Thank you, Rodrigo. Federico is asking us, the mini app store is created automatically when you develop a super app? No, the mini app center, as we call it, is one of the 3 components in the architecture of super apps. So every time that you want to create your super app, you will have to take that component into account for your architecture. It's going to be one of the key components of your architecture, and it will allow you to publish your mini apps, and it will make them accessible through the super app. So if you want to simplify the architecture of a super app system, you will have on the one hand the super app, in the middle the mini app center, and then you will have mini apps. Those will be the 3 basic components without which you can't have a super app solution. Perfect. Walter is asking us about a test mode for developers, and I'm copying the link to GeneXus trial, which you can download for free from the GeneXus website. Daniel is asking us, GeneXus is using the API services of ChatGPT. Sorry, just a minute. Regarding the previous question, maybe they were talking about GeneXus Next, in which case it is not open yet, but you can subscribe so that you can register, and when it becomes public, then you will get an invite to use GeneXus Next. I don't know if you have the link to that. Yes, absolutely. I'm gonna paste it on the chat. Okay, there you go. It's on the chat. And you have the link to sign up, and you have it in Spanish, English, and Portuguese. Okay, Rodrigo, let's stop for a minute. I think we have just one question left, because the rest, if I'm not mistaken, were suggestions. They were asking us if GeneXus was using the ChatGPT API services. We have a connection with a model that was fine-tuned. We changed a couple of things so that it would interpret correctly the messages that could come from GeneXus Next, and it could specifically understand what it was meant to create. So we will see the system very quickly, and if we have any question left, we can answer it in these 4 minutes that we have left. Here we see the back office that was created automatically by GeneXus Next based on the description that we wrote. Remember that we wanted a system for an employee payroll through which we could manage interviews, payments, and hirings. You see that we have all the different screens so that we can create information, add information. In this case, we have no trial data. So for example, we will create a position called Java Dev. And here we will start working on all the different entities that GeneXus asked us to, that we asked GeneXus to create, GeneXus Next. The important thing about this is, apart from the back office, all the entities that we requested GeneXus to generate, they were defined as an API so that we can eventually connect from internal systems and consume these endpoints. So for example, by creating all the information on the different openings or payments or employees and interviews, you can consume that from an external system. So this is where you see the true power that GeneXus has, thanks to this huge revolution that came to us through ChatGPT 3 in particular, but also all the different AI services. Perfect. Okay, you see that this was real time, right? It was text to solution, not text to code. It was text directly to the back office of an application that is up and running. So we have just a few minutes left, and we want to be careful with time. Raul was asking us if this generation will only create the back office. Well, you see that Rodrigo showed you precisely everything about that. How do you envision this being licensed in the future? That's a good question. As Rodrigo said, you can sign up for a list. For now, it doesn't have a cost, and then of course when it's put in production, definitely we will have some sort of licensing. Can you integrate GeneXus with Jira? Yes, you can integrate with Jira. I don't know at what level specifically it is. If you're talking about the IDE, integrating GeneXus with Jira for the IDE, many companies have done that. They have GeneXus and they are interested in including some activities that happen when it comes to developing and using, for example, Jira's ticketing system. When you make a change to a project, that automatically you should make some operation in Jira come to a stop. And of course, what you can do is you can create applications that will have a Jira integration. For instance, a web application where the end user can open a ticket, and that once you do that, it will be impacted on Jira. So yes, definitely we have integration with Jira. It is possible at different levels, both in terms of development as well as with application users. Okay, Jorge said, can you use any language? Do you need to specify number of entities, for example? Yes, Jorge, you can use any language. We could have used Spanish, but because the webinar is being translated into English and Portuguese simultaneously, and it's going to be recorded, we just chose to do it in English, but it could be done in Spanish. And regarding the number of entities, you don't need to specify that. You can just choose not to specify that. What we can do here is we can include as a condition for you to have an X number of entities if you want. Okay, Daniel is asking us, GeneXus apps are native, so do they have access to camera, etc., etc.? Is that native for iOS and Android? Yes, it is. And it has access to all the different features and functions of your phone, just like any other native application. Manuel, have you projected using a different programming language, for example, Python? Yes, I see that there are a couple of questions about that. And the inclusion of generators in other technologies, actually native generation for Android. Well, basically just to tell you about this and how we work from the development team and the product team when it comes to defining which generators will be included. What we do is we do a market assessment and we contrast that to the different possibilities that we have to implement technologies based on that time to market. So, for example, the last few that we implemented were the framework generators. We started with Angular as a framework generator because we understood that there is a huge need by our developers community to use frameworks nowadays when it comes to application building, and that was the first step that we took. But of course, all languages are very interesting to our developers, but not all of them will be very used depending on the kind of system that you're talking about. So that's why nowadays we are working mainly with .NET Core, the evolution of .NET Framework, and Java. And for mobile, we are using Swift native for iOS and Java for Android, apart from the possibility of generating with the Angular framework. Perfect. Okay, let's take two more questions. We have a few questions about the link to GeneXus Next. I'll share that on the chat in a minute. So there you have it. If you have any doubts, do reach us. But well, you should find it on the chat to understand more about GeneXus Next. Federico is asking us, GeneXus BPM is a different product that has a separate license. Okay, so the BPM modeler is included out of the box with GeneXus. So in GeneXus, you can do all the modeling for a business workflow using the BPMN 2.0 annotation. And that allows you to generate both web and mobile applications that will have workflow. When those solutions are put in production, so far we have no additional licensing. As we said, it's in the out-of-the-box IDE. But once that you put those solutions in a production environment, you have a special licensing that is called GXFlow, that are licenses per user for those people that have a role, such as, for example, approving a task, rejecting tasks, or maybe referring it to a colleague for assessment. So those people will have a GXFlow, a nominated GXFlow license per user that will have that extra licensing, but only for those people that have an active use of the workflow with very specific roles and tasks. And the last question, not to overextend. Okay, we did answer the JIRA question. Let me check. Could you, Anibal, maybe, I don't know if there is any way to write it on the Q&A box. Okay, so I'm going to answer Roberto's question on the Q&A box with the link. And I will also share with you the FAQs for GeneXus Next. So in the answer to the last question you have in the Q&A box, you should have it. Can you just give me a thumbs up if you have got access? Federico Pascale is asking us if we will have a webinar about GeneXus Next. Hopefully we will. Thank you for that comment. And yes, we have a lot of webinars coming up, especially considering that we were showing you some stuff about super apps. We'll have a webinar in May about super apps and mini apps. Don't miss that. If you go to the webinars site, the webinars page in GeneXus, you can register for those webinars. So from me and Rodrigo, thank you also very much for being with us in this first webinar of the year. Thank you so much. Till next time.